So welcome everybody to our fourth installation of the Digital Humanities After Hours. Today we're here with Martin Roček from Charles University and the Institute for Medieval Research at the Austrian Academy of Sciences, walking us through user experiences for digital humanities.
So, hello, thank you for having me here. And when I was thinking about what I can present, I thought, let's look at the interfaces and user experience of the tools that we develop in digital humanities, because that's really important part that we usually neglect for various reasons. So the first I want to show you is unclear interface. Well, if you look at it, you clearly see there is some search, there are some fields, and you think, okay, what can go wrong, right? Well, you would be surprised how many things can go wrong, because that's a catalog of Czech manuscripts. You can see it's the interface in English. And then you have words anywhere. So you assume, well, that will probably match the words in the manuscript. So if I'm looking for Latin manuscript, I'll probably write something in Latin. Okay. But then you have provenance. And we are already going into a problem, because what you are supposed to write there. Because if you click here, you can see it's the same query, which means that you have to type the text, and you need to know what text you want to type there. So should I write it in Czech? Should I write it in English? Should I write it in different language because I'm looking for Italian manuscript? And the same applies to date, because, well, you have this input, and what I'm supposed to write there, should I write there 2nd March 1453, or should I write there the standard ISO format of date, or should I write there just the date, or 19th century, 18th century, whatever. And that's just the basis. And then if you look at the other side, there's plenty of things that are really wrong, but we will get to that a little bit later. And so I was thinking, even though this website is really useful, and if you are used for searching like for information about manuscripts, you probably can get yourself a more understand the database and how it actually works. Although if you work with manuscripts in Czech Republic, most people really hate that database for so many reasons. But it's still the best one we have. So we, as a digital humanities scholars, usually face several challenges. Well, I took the most obvious ones. The first is complexity, because the data we produce are usually tries to capture really intricate relationships, have different variants, different forms. There are several layers of context and so on. And you can clearly see the thing, there are several layers, there's certain complexity in the labels of the manuscripts. But we also fight with overload, which is something which not many really realize, that if we present lots of filters, lots of options, and don't really guide the user, we overload them with choice paralysis, and then they don't know what to do on the website, and what they do, they usually quit the website, which is exactly what can happen here if you are not really familiar or you don't need the manuscript really much. And then the most probably basic thing is that different users have different needs, and that's something I often struggle to explain when I'm trying to work with people on digital humanities project, because they want to build a tool for all, but you can't really do that really well, because researchers have different needs than the students, and of course the general public, which is not really, which don't understand the topic on the same deep level as the researcher or students of the topic, have completely different goals and expect different levels of precision. So you really need to figure out who is your audience and then try to build the app for them. Of course, you get extended later. And the last thing is hidden assumptions, which often is some sort of jargon or something that we try to we perceive as something really understandable and easy to understand, but it's really hard for the user to actually work around with that and use the tool. But we also, when we are developing tools, we have lots of opportunities how to make things right. So we can design a gateway to the world that's we are researching, we can sort of present in an understandable way the manuscripts and invite the people to actually browse through them. And if we focus on efficiency and reduce the cognitive load and think about how the interface is structured, we actually invite them even more, and they are in sort of oasis to browse through the information. And by that we also generate sort of engagement, but we should also think of different ways how to engage the people. So it could be like maps, could be networks, could be narratives, which brings more curiosity in the project. And then what we got is the user that actually is interested in browsing through the database. And I think that's one of the things that's really often missing from the tools, because I saw lots of really nice, amazing projects in the background if you talk with the people. But if you try to use them as a user who don't have the knowledge, then you get completely lost. And then we often hear like, but what the people in the humanities do. And the last thing, which is more like for us as a humanist, we should focus on transparency. So telling where we get the data, how certain we are that the data are correct. We should also think about versioning of the information that we are having on the website, because someone can cite us, and then then you decide, okay, it's time to update the website or the information there. And by then, when someone looks for the reference, the content already changed, and it could bring several problems, so we should keep that in mind too. So my talk will be structured into 3 sort of different topics, but really closely related, because these 3 are, let's say, the most basic things that can help you design a better experience for the users. So first we will go through a practical part where I try to show you the usual design process, how it can be followed, and what can bring to your project. Then there is part which I call argument, because by developing the interface, we are already setting certain argument how we perceive the data and what we want to say to the world through it, or to the user. And then of course, while we are doing all these things, we have some risks, and I will try to get through the most common ones and suggest some mitigations for these risks. So let's dive into practice. And the first thing is this process which I took from design thinking method, which relies on 5 steps which are then repeated from the beginning. So first what we do is empathize with the user. We try to understand needs. Then we define the needs and try to describe them as much as possible, figure out, for example, the gaps that we can fill with our project, and then we should ideate, think about the various options, what we can develop, how to develop it, and lie some ground. Then we should prototype as quickly as possible all the ideas, and ideally then we should test the ideas. And as we get the feedback, we are returning back to step 1, because then we need to reflect on the feedback, empathize to it, and again go through all these steps. So the first thing with empathizing, we are not our users, because we have different knowledge. We know everything about our data, we know everything about the features we want to implement, and we also know really well how to use the tool that we are developing or that we are working with. And also intuition is not really good guide, because sometimes, well, most often, it's really hard for us to understand that someone might not understand the most basic principles that we are introducing in the app or in the data, because, well, I've developed a dictionary, I will show you the screenshot later, and I know about thousands of tiny features that I implemented because I was too lazy to search for full word. I wanted something special from that, and so on. But most users don't know about them. I mean, I provide with certain manuals, and often on my social networks inform the people that there are these options, but what I can see, they are not that much discovered. And partially it's my decision to not to highlight them that much, but partially it's a problem which you can solve if you actually have a testers and if you focus on that part. So the easiest rule is, if it takes you 1 step, expect 3 to 5 steps for a user for the same tasks, because for them it will be much more complex to actually navigate through your app. So next step, or part of the first step, is also research, which we already did with our data. We sort of research our topic, but what we should do is also research the people for which we are developing the project. We should characterize our project in terms of what are our goals, what do we want to show, and what questions are we trying to answer, which for humanities scholars is sort of easier, because what are the goals we already set by defining the research, and then saying what the questions that we are trying to answer. But it can also shift a little bit based on the group that you are trying to talk to. So the most important is, what do you want to show? And then you should decide who is your user, because we should sort of clarify that, because sometimes it could be us, and in that sense we are the best testers, but often it's not us, it's some sort of group. So is it researcher, is it student, or is it general public? Based on that, when we sort of get the idea, we should develop something that's called in the design thinking method a persona, which is a detailed fictional representation of your user, and includes some information about that, like the information-seeking behavior, technical savviness, and motivations. So this is how the persona can look like. And as you can see, I have here Helga Jóns's daughter. She is a PhD student. She lives in Iceland. She has knowledge of 4 languages. But what I also have is like demographical information, her behavior, like what she do. So we, based on that she searched through catalogs, IIIF repositories, has some knowledge of TEI, we already can say that person is knowing something about the technology. So if you want to do something for that person, we can afford to be more complex in terms of what we are developing. Then we have the goals. Either we divide them to short-term, medium-term, and long-term. So her goals are identify the witnesses and normalize shirt marks and authorities. So it goes in the direction that she will probably need something with the metadata. Then medium-term is collate variants and draft apparatus in TI. So now the interface is getting slightly bigger. And then, of course, defending the dissertation, but also providing suitable digital edition and deposit file fair data. So what we are actually developing, if we want to aim for that persona, is quite huge portal of various technical aspects. Then we can look at the challenges and pains, which is something that pains most of the scholars, is that the catalogs are inconsistent in the metadata, that there is limited like reliability for the OCR HDR for medieval scripts. So we sort of can create a portal which, let's say, gathers the data, goes through them, tries to normalize them, and then makes, let's say, persistent links. We can also include sort of OCR HDR on the current models. Well, it's a fictional character, and the tool that we would develop would be probably loved by many scholars, especially medievalists, because it would solve lots of problems that we have. But that's the basis I wanted to show, and that's how your persona should look like. I should also mention that I used a lot of AI to sort of generate this persona, which shouldn't be your case. You should do really your research and think about what are the needs for your user. When we get that, we should start ideating and prototyping. So first thing, what we need to do as a humanities scholars is forget about how humanities background and stop chasing perfection, because as academics we tend to do things perfect, because why we should bother someone with something incomplete? And that's not the case of this. We need to bother the people as quickly as we get the ideas, because then we can get quickly feedback and we can actually iterate the whole process. And I can say that often when I'm developing something, I ask my friends. I have few friends around, and then they always find and get valuable feedback that actually helps to move the products somewhere, because often I am kind of stuck in the mood of what I want to achieve, but don't have the optics to see that there might be some problems. So one of the things that I wanted to show you is that while I was teaching or part of Cambridge workshop, the focus was on an exhibition about palimpsests. And the goal was basically, there were 3 personas to choose from. One of them was a kid, one of them was like, let's say 30-year-old PhD student, and then some rentier. So we decided to go with the kid because that would be the most fun, right? You can do a game. So we developed this beautiful UI prototype, which was like 2 days of work. So it looks like that. But the idea was to explain how the palimpsest is actually made. We started with the full manuscript process. So you get the parchment, then you have to use the scraping knife to get rid of the dark spots, then you have to use the knife to actually get your the shape, then the powder to get it ready for writing, and then you get the ink to actually write. And in between that, you should also draw the lines. And we also provide you with a guide. You can choose actually 3 guides. One is rabbit, one is dragon, and one is some unnamed knight. And the idea was, well, let's make it fun and don't really constrain the kids. So we just put here a little toolkit telling you, now it's time to use the scraping knife. But as you can expect, what happened with the kids when they arrived to a testing station, they just completely ignored the whole process, and by using all the tools that were available to them. So what happened on the canvas was quite a mess, and it didn't really serve the purpose. So we had to actually step back and rethink the process, and what we did is gating the whole process. So we actually showed first the pop-up, you first need the scraping knife, so you have prepared the manuscript or the parchment. Then you need to do this and that, and after each step there was another like block, full screen information what they should do, and by the end we also introduced some system of rewards, like they got the stars, and then I think we gave them some sort of stickers for being part of the testing. So that was the experience, and that's exactly what can happen with your users. I mean, you probably won't design stuff for kids that often, but users tend to explore, and maybe they break you up, they completely destroy your idea, and you should be prepared to accept that you went in the wrong direction and then step back and actually rethink the whole thing so you serve the purpose you want to. But I want to also show you, because that was quite a complex interface, what you can do is using something called wireframes, where you basically draw shapes and put the content on certain places, and then you can test just on that, because it's not about the information that's in there, it's about how the user navigates through. Of course, at a certain point you need to add the information, but for the first steps of testing, this is pretty enough. I mean, you can see there is a menu, there is some content, there are some filters, and there are some entries. Let's imagine this is a whole process, so you can click on the entry and then you open this sort of description. And that's the process you can design. But the coolest thing is you don't even need digital tools for that. You can do it with sticky notes, with paper that you have in your office, and you just draw the things and then you can try to test them, which leads us to the testing. So what often people think when it comes to testing, I need lots of people, I need lots of money, I need a laboratory, I need lots of stuff for that. Well, that's not really true. Because if you find 5 people, and I put that to say that everybody has 5 people around, either could be students, colleagues, friends, either if they match your persona, but not necessarily. You can try different people and they are still quite valuable. And if you give these 5 people tasks, you should sort of focus on something that's not browse through my app and find something, because, well, what happens is they open it and say, cool, nice. You should ask them actually about finding some information on the website. And while doing that, ideally during some coffee break or meeting, you observe, stay quiet, and you don't say anything. You don't apologize if they get struggling. If they can't find anything, you just ask them to think aloud, so you see the mental process behind it, and you note all these struggles, all these informations that you get from that. And these 5 people will help you actually discover 80% of the biggest issues of your application or website. And it really doesn't matter if it fits the persona or not, because at some point there are certain flows that are just universal. So how to design a proper task is that you try, I use number of 5 tasks, but it could be anything between, let's say, 3 to 5, 10, what you decide to, but they should focus on specific parts. First is lookup, like looking for some information, looking at something on the website. Then exploratory, they should try to find something themselves, or look at the website, click around, whatever. Then analytical should be a little bit complex task. And then some edge case, which could be something different for each application. But that could be actually the most valuable thing, because if you cover the edge case, you can be sure that the middle is covered too. Then you should define severity for each task. If it's a blocker, that the person just couldn't go anywhere. If it's a major, that there are some minor issues that can lead to sort of lose of the users, or if it's something minor. And then the basic rule is fix top 5 before you add new features. And then also you don't want to bother your colleagues for long, so ideally you set a time. Could be 15 minutes, I think like for the 5 tasks, 15 minutes is enough. And then you get the feedback, you can talk a little bit after the feedback, after you actually get the information. So while you are doing this, that leads us to that you are also building an argument with your UI and the way how you present data. And you should be well aware of a problem of overload, not just by designing the task, but also how you define the user interface, because things can get really messy. And as scholars, we are really good at it, because we think the more option I give to my user, the more neutral the interface is. But what actually we introduce is the paralysis, choice paralysis. So as Dietrich Rem says, less is often more. And so we should, at the beginning or at the starting stages, we should really focus on the core of the thing, and then we can work around. And I use a beautiful website, Encyclopedia of Romantic Nationalism in Europe, and as you can see, the search is like that. You wouldn't be able to find anything. But there is a lot of more problems on the website, because that's the first landing page that you are welcome to. And if you look, what do you guess is this button for? Is it opening a video? Does it navigate you somewhere? Or what are these tiny numbers about? Is it number of records? Is it some sort of notifications that the people or the tabs want to talk with you? Is this highlight for something? Because that wasn't me highlighting the text, that is just a yellow highlight. And we can go around the website really, really deeply, and we will find lots of issues. But I didn't want to just like shoot down the website talking about all the issues, so I thought, well, let's rethink the whole website. So the first issue that I noticed immediately is, do you know where we are right now, on which page? Are you? So, well, we are on an encyclopedia, you can see here. But if you make it obvious, it's much more easier for you to understand. And another thing is, these beautiful buttons are actually not videos, as you would expect based on the icon, but those are the tabs for the different, let's say, topics in the encyclopedia. So if you think about just these tiny little details, how you present this stuff, it actually starts to make the user interface cleaner. Then if you look, I just removed the number of notifications because those are number of records, because it's the least important information. If you are looking for it, you can find it here. And that's all the stuff that, and actually another thing is, it says like click for menu of culture crons and communities and blah blah blah, but do you realize it's actually a search? So why not just invite the user to type there something, and if they want something, they actually can select from the topics because you navigate them to them. And so what really matters here is also that we should start small, which probably didn't happen with the encyclopedia because that's a website which should serve as a sort of companion to a book. So they already had tons of data, had different visions how to present the stuff. but we should really start with something small, something meaningful, that's easy to understand for the user. For example, here are the manuscripts from let's say Prague library, and we should be transparent, so we should explain the initial selection, we should explain how we sort and rank them, because that already sets some expectations. And ideally we should guide the user to the next step, which I decided to use one of my websites, that we don't need a really huge guide. We don't need someone, I don't know, the clip is screaming at me, telling me that I should make the font bold, but I can just invite the user to type a Latin word or phrase here, for example, anything. And then the user knows, okay, this is the search bar. By the way, if you open the dictionary, it's already pre-selected for you, so you can start typing already if you know the website. But if you don't, you have this sort of highlight, but then also you can read here, or you can decide to read through that. But that's just a little nudge to the user if they are unsure where and how to navigate through the website. You can do easily just that. So while we are presenting the information, we should keep in mind that the interface is not neutral, and it really depends, because if I say, let's imagine a data set of scriptoria in Europe, and now we decide, okay, there's lots of geographical information, let's map it on the map. And so by that we are already saying, look at the geography, look at the controls, culture centers, styles, and possible trade roads. And which also means that we are more interested in geographical and economical history. But we can decide, okay, we have the same data, but let's do it a networking graph. And now the message is slightly different, because we tell the user follow the relations, follow the connection between text, scribes, places, and now we are promoting more transmission and intellectual history. And none of these two views are wrong. They're actually both really amazing, but we should think what we want to say through the project. And now we are getting again to the Manuscriptorium website, because even the way how we display the metadata, how we show them, is something that really matters, because we already are setting some sort of what the user can expect from that and how the user interacts with that. So I choose one record of a manuscript from Manuscriptorium, and if you look at this, if you are not used to work with manuscripts, you kind of think, what's happening there? It's quite ugly. And why there are these stars? Is it like how favorite is the manuscript is? Well, it doesn't work at all. So if someone was really, if you think about how to present it, you would probably say, okay, one of the most important things when you are looking for manuscript is the shelf mark, actually, because that helps you identify the manuscript quite quickly. And it's really hidden here, and I mean, it's quite big on this screen, but if you see one, then you realize it's really tiny. And the title, presumably, is telling you a little bit something, but not really much, and it's not that important in the terms of I'm looking for specific manuscript, because usually, like I said, you are looking for some shelf mark. So making the shelf mark more visible and either getting completely rid of the title or hiding it somewhere below, because the titles are quite long for some of the manuscripts, would make it much more cleaner. And then this source, which funny enough, it's from like English translation of the book, but here's a Czech word. So that's another thing, like translating and thinking about the problems there. But also another important information for you, because you're looking for manuscript, for example, in a certain place, or where to get the actual physical thing. So yeah, you should really also think about the data that you are presenting. I mean, you ideally should store as much data as you can find about the things, and then you can just decide, okay, let's show a little bit here, a little bit there. And then in the future, if you decide I want to expand the project, or I want to, do some charts or some information, some statistical stuff, you have all the data in the database, but it doesn't need to be visible at that point. Which, with the translation stuff, I just reminded myself that I want to say at the very beginning that if you have languages like Czech or Icelandic or the local languages, and you have the websites like the Manuscriptorium that I presented. The user don't really know which language to type in, especially if you don't provide them with clear information, with, for example, with the provenance or the local names. If you provide them, if you are on a Czech website which is half translated and doesn't provide you with a list of options, then you don't know, should I write it there in Czech or should I write it in English, because the interface looks kind of English. And funny enough, what I found when I was like playing around the Manuscriptorium is, it really depends if you write Praha in like the Czech spelling or if you write Prague as in English, because with the Czech name you get like, I think 2090 hits, but if you decide to write it in English you get just 51. So that's another problem with the UI, because you can clearly say the metadata were not clearly cleared and are not really well connected, because it shouldn't really matter. And so now we go to risks, which is, well, I chose the three most dangerous ones. The first one is, let's say, hidden bias, which is a view that we already sort of shape by presenting certain categories. For example, gender can already sort of present some problems for certain groups, especially if you do modern history, or if you use something like sorting by relevance, what actually relevance is, and I will get to it later. Then we have a simplification, which is problem by itself and can help your website makes really unusable. And the last thing is the flow of interaction. So hidden bias is, I used as an example the features like relevance, because ranking feels neutral, but how we decide what's actually relevant, is it the most cited? Is there something hidden which we already know and we are actually feeding to that, so we are building sort of digital canon, for example, the most cited authors. If we use that as a relevance, then we are already like hiding the less cited authors. Or the most common thing, we have the full text search, we type the name of author, but unfortunately the name of the author is similar to some sort of object or anything, and then if we have full text we get like thousands of hits on something that's really unusable and not really useful. So the critical question for us is asking relevant according to whom and for what purpose, and if it actually helps to discover or reinforce some existing canon. Another thing is the simplification, which is the huge challenge there, because all databases, especially interfaces, require some sort of simplification, but we have two options. We can go with sort of lazy simplification, which we imagine a database of people, and we have these anachronistic categories like noble, clergy, and commoner. We not only exclude certain people that don't fit into that category, but we sort of feel like we are helping to certain stereotype and not really resourceful research thing. So we should think about thoughtful simplification, which, for example, is using tags, which gives us more variations. We can also decide to preserve the original term in source, and we can also express certain certainty of that classification. And I mean, by then we are actually extending a little bit the search field and the options that the user can tweak on. But that's another thing, but we can think of simplification there while maintaining all this information still accessible. And if we do that, we already sort of simplified in a really good way. And the most important is flow of interaction, because every interface should tell a story, and we should really think about the part that the user is encouraged to take, what's clickable, because what's more annoying than if you have click on link here, it's not highlighted. And now if you are on mobile phone where you don't have the fancy function of hovering, you are thinking, should I click there, does it do something? And then suddenly it doesn't do anything, and then you are really frustrated with the website. So we should be also aware of information dead end, which is like you are searching for some information. Let's say you want to read a medieval text, you open it, and then what happens is like you don't know anywhere to go. But if you highlight, for example, some people names, some places, you're already allowing the person to discover more and get more engaged with the text and follow certain path. And so we should do a generous interfaces which can help every answer turn into new question, new opportunities for exploration, and actually help the person to discover related sources, related items, and so on. And so to conclude the talk, I think as a digital humanist, we sort of wear two hats if we decide to design our apps. The first one is the designer, the person what I try to briefly describe here. And the goal of that is to ask ourselves, is this understandable? And we should, or this hat should help us to prevent something that's completely useless. Or then we have the other hat, that's a scholar's hat that we are used to wear. And that's the questions are like, what argument I'm making, whose perspective I'm missing. And the goal is to actually build the tools that are not irresponsible. So we should ask or include in our pursuit for developing better applications these 5 questions. The first most important one is who was the tool is really designed for? Is it an expert? Is it a researcher? Is it a novice? What the story does the default view tell? Like what we are presenting when you open the app. Is it a story of geography, chronology, or social networks? And then we should also think about what categories we hide and what then makes it invisible. And are there any dead ends, and are there any paths to discovery? Can we actually engage the users to discover a little bit more? And then also what is missing and what's impossible to search for, to see, or question within this interface. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions?
It's really useful for us, I think, in the center with all our projects. Well, we may not always be entirely clear about what our audience is. But how would you, I know this may be a silly question to ask, but one of our kind of big project now is to develop a kind of a web portal, portal into more or less everything. And we're going to populate it with everything we can possibly find that is digitally available. And it's supposed to be a tool for researchers, for amateur researchers, for the general public, for children, whomever. So everyone should be able to play and use it. So how do you start
I think
designing
that's a really hard task because you should probably really try to focus on one group who will use it most, and then do really test with them, and then ask the other groups who will use it second most, and build the snowball around that. But it could also lead to deception because at certain point you will show lots of information that actually are not enough for the true researcher, but too much for a general audience. So either you can have completely sort of different front ends, which allows you different interactions, or it's really hard task for this. I would say it needs a lot of testing to actually figure out what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
In that sense.
But when does a database become too inclusive? Sometimes there's the tendency of including everything you can just because you have the gadgets available. Sometimes you imagine that this could be 2 websites instead of 1.
Yeah.
Do you encounter problems of this kind?
Yeah, well, it really depends how to define the question you want to answer with your data. It's really nice that you have lots of data to display, and then if there are really different views, I would suggest, okay, let's do 2 websites instead of 1, or clearly or make it as 1, but clearly separate. This is focused on that part, and this is more on that part.
There is because it took the example of the kind of the romantic kind of national saints. which is a partly a project that was developed here. And it reminds me of a lot of pages of this sort. It's a place where you kind of store things for other people to be able to access.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not your the idea may not be to tell a story. It's just this is what we have kind of collected and it's there, and we kind of made it kind of accessible for you.
Yeah, but that's like the lazy accessibility, I would say, because you are like, I'm just throwing at you some data and do whatever you want to with them. And I mean, the interface could be much more friendly in a way, like the way how it's presented, like you decide, okay, you can download the full data set with all the information, but here's just a peek on what's possible. And then the user, as it goes through the app, he can discover more information, more ways how to interact with the content. But if you throw everything at them at once, then they are really paralyzed. And I mean, I was like going a lot through the database because I was fascinated what's in there and how like different views are here and there. But that's sort of, I would say it can be simplified to a way, if you need the tool, you will know where to find it. But if you don't, it can stay hidden most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But for a standardized thing, such as a manuscript catalog, because they should be all pretty similar, right? You would imagine that someone came up with the idea of making a structure for it, or a style sheet which everybody can use. Has that ever been tried in the case?
I mean, part of it is probably TEI. There was a try, with the header that you have basically standardized the information, or they try to be standardized. The issue is that you have very different ways how to actually encode the stuff, which brings the problem.
Yeah, then again, the interface can be very different from one place to another. You have to learn every time how to use the database.
Yeah. I mean, the idea I was presenting as a part of a joke, which actually might not be even a joke right now, is imagine you have a portal where you type whatever part of a text incipit shelf mark. It goes through all the databases as a Google does and gives you relevant research or relevant results. Because you can kind of easily tell what the shelf mark is, the dating is of the manuscript. And if you employ a little bit of AI into that, you can get really nice results. And then you basically overcome this trouble with, I need to learn your database, the database have completely wrong structure or whatever troubles there.
So about AI, so you produced a Helga persona with using AI, and apparently people are using kind of AI personas in all kinds of research, in psychological research. But you were kind of dismissive of it, so you kind of excused yourself. So is that not a potential way to go?
I mean, there is a huge discussion in the design community if we should use the AI generated personas or not. But where AIs try to, support you or answer in a way you want to be to get the answer. And I can't really imagine the prompt neutral enough to actually get the results that will point you to a certain direction. I mean, you can probably use it if you have forms and tons of data to sort of generate the persona for you based on the statistical data that you have, because that's something that designers use. But just purely asking ChatGPT, I am building a tool for a medievalist in his 30s and he knows a little bit about computers. What am I supposed to do, or what's the often struggle and the technical savory in it and all that stuff? And I think it can't really help you, but that's my point of view that I sort of,
Mm-hmm. That's not the easy way out. Yeah.
thank you.
A lot to think about.
So thank you again for coming and attending, and thank you for the talk.
Thank you.